At this point in time, I'd like to go ahead and transition things over to Mr. Brian Calley in beginning our next topic, which I think, again, got highlighted pretty well during his discussion earlier today as we look to address talent, retention, recruitment, all of those things. You going to need anything here? Okay, I'll get out of your way.
All right, if I could have, first of all, congratulations on having enough staff to spend all day with us, first of all. Thank you for that. We'll have some pretty interesting discussions. Then Quentin Messer Jr. from the new CEO or new-ish CEO of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation will be up here for a few days, but he's going to start here with just a little reception here at the end. Would love for you to meet him. I'm a big fan of his. I think that it was a great move within MEDC to bring him on board, a great mindset that I think will, in the way that he views economic development is particularly positive for areas that aren't metropolis areas, you know, the types of places where I'm from and where you're from. Could I have Bill Raymond and Ruth Solinsky and Spencer Stang come on up and just have a seat here, and we'll have a conversation about workforce. And you know, earlier today when we gave the thank you. Earlier today when we talked about the workforce challenges and how they're not just going to go away, wanted to follow that up with a real discussion on, you know, I should have thought about a ramp situation. My apologies there, Bill. We wanted to follow it up with a conversation that made it much more practical. So we can see the stats. We know it's difficult. Unfortunately, there is no reason to believe that it is going to get any easier in the future. And so to really break it down to real kind of practical discussion, we wanted to take it off the charts and the stats and really just get down to business. But let's start with just some introductions, and maybe since Ruth, it looks like you've got all mic'd up, we'll start with you. Maybe just a quick intro on who you are.
Sure, thanks. Hi, everybody. My name's Ruth Solinsky. I currently serve as the Director of HR and Total Rewards for what is today Resolve Surgical. You may know it better as RTI Surgical. We're a biomed manufacturing facility in Marquette, and we have the blessing of having a view of Lake Superior out the window, so get to do meaningful work in a great environment. I've been in HR for many, many years. I was thinking about Gina's comments as she was saying them around surviving this pandemic. It's the first one I've been through, but getting to the other side with our employees intact was a real win. But I have a master's degree from Northern, so it's a great day to be a Wildcat, as well as a bachelor's degree from the University of Texas at Dallas. And I'm looking forward to spending some time with this great panel that we have.
All right, excellent. Thanks, Ruth. And Dr. Spencer Stang, same thing.
Hi, I'm Spencer Stang. I own Stang Decision Systems. We started in 2001 and headquartered in Marquette. We also have a Lakeview. And our main product is a software as a service called HireScore, which is a service that we use to help companies hire people, a little bit of employee development as well, but primarily hiring start to finish. I have a PhD in industrial and organizational psychology from the University of Missouri, St. Louis. Wife and 2 kids, a dog, cat, and a lizard. That's it.
All right, very good. And Bill Raymond.
Hi, I'm Bill Raymond. I'm the CEO for Upper Peninsula Michigan Works. I've been up here about 4.5 years, and we have offices in 14 out of the 15 counties in the UP, so hopefully we're very accessible for our business and job seeker customers. And one thing I like to say, I ran into a nice little bumper sticker a couple of years ago. So, says, I may not have been born in the UP, but I got here as fast as I could. So, and we love it up here. We live in the Gladstone area, and my wife and I, my wife Finetta and I are, like I say, happy to be up here, and we've had a good time. And just to be, to try to fit in with the UP culture, and in honor of Gina Thorson and her dad, I do have my Stormy Cromer equipment on with my shirt and my vest, so I can vouch for it.
Yeah,
Very
you know,
smooth, very smooth.
I was going to mention too that, and I hadn't run into Bob in quite a while, but my son who drove me up here because I had PRK eye surgery about a week ago, when back in 2011 I was first elected, he came up here with me and we were visiting a lot of places. We stopped by Stormy Cromer, and they made a sign when we walked in. And I was lieutenant governor at the time, you know, first year lieutenant governor, and it was, you know, kind of a big deal. And anyway, they made this sign up, and it said, my son's name is Colin. It said, "Welcome Colin Callie and his dad." And he kept that sign up in his room for years. And he wanted to get something to eat. There's this Cajun place in town. Every time we're in Marquette, so he's off eating right now. He can drive now, so consider yourself warned. So let's start, Ruth. You're in human resources.
Mm-hmm.
Human resources is, you know, it's been there's so much changing out there in the world today. Can you maybe give us a lay of the land? And before we get into the practical strategies and things, just you know, what's happening out there on the ground right now?
Yeah. So I pulled a couple of stats in preparation for our conversation, and we have today 10.9 million open positions, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And on average, the turnover rate is running right about 58%. So I think I shared with you guys when we were getting to know each other that we have a recruiter, and we were working on a particular search, and he said, you know, Ruth, the war for talent is over, and talent won. And it was a profound moment just to be thinking about the fact that as we're going to the marketplace, the needs and expectations of our potential employees are completely different than they were when we were probably starting out. And COVID only cemented that, in my view, in that people really hit the reset button on what was important to them, from a work-life balance standpoint, where they wanted to live, right? The geography that they wanted to occupy. I think there are some pluses and minuses for all of us who are trying to attract talent to the UP. I think there are people who are knocking on our doors today because they had an hour-and-a-half commute, or they were spending time in ways that weren't meaningful and weren't feeding their inner life. And so they're interested in a place like Marquette, or really throughout the UP. And there are also challenges for us in that I think COVID taught us that for knowledge-based work, it can be done anywhere. So if you were retaining employees because they wanted to live in Marquette and not because you had such a fantastic culture, now all of those other institutions are knocking on their door. And so I think it just turns up the volume a little bit on employment experience and what we have to be ready to do to embrace today's staff and the staff of the future.
So Spencer, kind of the same question, but let's with everything that has changed, and maybe even, you know, sprinkle in some that, you know, there's a generational change that's happening right now too, and the one going out and the one coming in are, let's just say, dissimilar to each other. And so, but maybe just talk about the types of strategies, how the landscape has changed, and how employers have to, are approaching accommodation of those changes.
Well, I guess to start, I've been kind of excited in the last couple of years because I've had to relearn everything that I thought I knew. Everything that used to be simple, you know, we're going to post a job, we're going to get this many applicants, we're going to fill it in 30 days, and it's a whole new ballgame. I mean, everything is different. The expectations of the candidates are completely different. So we've had to adapt, and we've had to say, I don't know more than I like to say, but we are definitely learning as we go in this process. For sure, from the employer's perspective, you need to kind of forget what you think you know and just start over, new data, and having conversations like this is a good starting point. Looking at the data and kind of, I put an asterisk by every data point, every statistic that you'd say from, the unemployment rate to how long it takes to fill a job, how much it's going to cost to fill a job, how much you're going to have to pay. All that in the past is, it's still useful information, but you cannot count on it. So you have to be ready to adapt, ready to learn it. For example, if we put out a job posting, if it's not working in 3 days, we start changing stuff. We change the budget, we change the job title, we change where it's posted. Because if it's not working right away, it's probably not going to work in 2 weeks or 30 days.
So, Bill, with kind of hitting on a highlight that was described earlier, that, there are organizations, there are tools, there are resources, but people running businesses, heads down, dealing with day to day. Could you maybe give us some insight into what are some of the most practical tools that you
Sure.
wish more people knew about?
Well, I think other speakers have mentioned this too, but working on retention is one of the big things. I've seen that a lot. Because there are people out there looking for work, but as you know, those can be few and far between and hard to pry away from their current job. But if you have a good, strong culture, you pay people adequately, you have other things in place that make people feel like there's a purpose, they're affirmed and valued, things like that, that goes a long way toward, but one of the things that Spencer mentioned too, I was just reading an article recently that talked about, he mentioned the generational thing. Take a look at aging baby boomers, because it says there are a lot of boomers, like in their 50s even, and late 50s, that have left the workforce but weren't ready to retire, so they're not drawing Social Security, so they may be working for full-time or even part-time work. So take a look at that population, because it's strong work ethic, they show up, they do the job, all of those things. So take a look at that too, but I would also take a look at younger workers that may not have the exact experience or length of experience you work for. I know we often hear from younger workers, I need a job to get experience, but they want me to have more experience than I've got, so can you hire me? Take a chance on people, especially if you get someone, they're smart, they're hardworking, they're eager to learn, and look for somebody who's really eager to learn, because you can teach those skills. So if they bring those employability skills, take a chance on them, give them that experience, because they're desperately looking for that. So I think those are some of the practical ways. And I know at Michigan Works, we do that, but also we're focusing on training for people. I know up in the UP, it's been, especially over the last couple of years, some of our training dollars weren't being used because people weren't quite looking for that. But as a company, take a look at what you can do for your internal training, but then take a look at, say, Michigan Works or other organizations where they can provide community colleges that can provide some scholarships. The state of Michigan has Michigan Reconnect and the Future for Frontliners funding that can go a long way, because I think in the future, we've all heard the stories about the jobs of the future they're not there yet. We don't know what they are, but people are going to need that training and that foundation. So invest in those people as much as you can and encourage them, because that concept of adult learning and continual learning, I think, will really go a long way. And but in the UP, that can be a little tricky, because people, they need to take care of their families, but can they get training at the same time they take care of their families? And there are some ways we can focus on that, but those are some of the first things that come to mind.
Back in January of 2019, I was just exiting office. I got a call from a friend who just became governor, and that I'd known for a long time, served in the legislature with Governor Whitmer, and said, I'd like to do something similar to what Tennessee did with Reconnect and My Opportunity Scholarship, but essentially to make to make community college or post-high school certificates broadly available to everybody, and essentially take cost out of the equation. And ask, would I be willing to kind of coalesce the business community around that? Now, the whole business community did come around it and support it. For us, though, in particular, it was the idea that you could do one at a time, right? You didn't have to have a block of 20 people that needed to go through and get a credential. You could do one person at a time, could access this benefit. And it didn't have to be in conjunction with the business, but we saw it as a pretty cool tool that could be used for smaller companies that are literally just moving small handfuls of people through training at any given point in time. So it really worked well. And it was, I expected it would be successful. It got passed and funded, passed through the legislature, funded in the next budget. But the enrollment was even surprising to me. I mean, I thought it'd be successful. I saw what happened in Tennessee, but it was pretty huge. And I'm right off the top of my head, I can't remember exactly. Do you happen to remember how many people enrolled with it? If any, tens of thousands.
I think the Michigan Reconnect, 91,000 is the number I'm
Yeah,
remembering.
that sounds about right. I know we had somebody from Governor Whitmer's office here earlier, but so it's think about that many people. You get workforce shortages, so you really need more productivity out of our existing workforce, and it's pretty exciting to think of that type of change. So we touched a little bit then, and I want to lean into a discussion on the idea of mission and purpose. We have a generation different than before, and I'm from that Generation X, kind of the tail end of Gen X, but it's the generation that, I don't know, it's like an I don't care generation, kind of like chip on your shoulder, just, go in and do the work and don't complain. But then, there's a generation after that really wants to be a part of something that's bigger than themselves. This idea of mission and purpose. And I wonder if we could have the three, really I'll throw it out to anybody, but just the idea of that kind of mission or purpose, or that bigger overarching aspect of the work and that somebody is contributing to, and how important that is today.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and I think that context is everything, right? We talked about this earlier, that if for most of us, we're going to get out of school and we're going to spend the next 90,000 hours of our life in somebody's employ or owning our own business. And you really would hate to look back on those 90,000 hours and think that they didn't count for something, right? We spend the majority of our time with the people that we work with and engaged in the work that we do. And so having a broader purpose and being able to create a compelling vision is a really great tool for retention. Because you can have a bad day, but if you believe in what you're doing and you believe in the team that you're working with, you're going to get past the bad day. If you don't have a leadership team that cares about you, or friendships at work or some broader meeting, that bad day is going to be the day the recruiter calls. And you're going to pick up that phone. So I like to think, Bill, about what you were saying earlier. The cheapest hire is this staff you already have.
Yep.
So finding ways to just honor them and engage them and grow them is a great way to retain just a really quality workforce.
And I would add to that the mission doesn't have to be the company's mission. It's a combination of the person helping the organization achieve its mission or its goals. But the organization is also helping that person. So for example, we had a client had an employee who wanted to spend half her time working with animal shelters. So it was just, and there was a time where that was all that she did, but she realized that by making more money, she could actually help the shelter more than by just working at the shelter. So she kind of traded and worked about 30 hours a week, gave a significant amount to the shelter, still had a super flex schedule to be able to help. I mean, her true purpose was animals. It wasn't the company. The company was a means to an end, but it still helped her achieve her mission, and then she helped the company. So it doesn't have to be where you're perfectly aligned. Sometimes it's trading, so everybody can achieve their goals.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Spencer, because I can speak from experience. Now, in full transparency, I'll let you know that I'm 72 years old. So, and I'm not thinking about retiring. Now, I just re-upped for another 5 years with Michigan Works, so my board was glad to see that happen. I've got a great relationship with my boards, and our staff are great, and some of which are over here at one of the tables. But I see my personal mission as kind of a tongue-in-cheek. I want to be the oldest Michigan Works director in both either the state of Michigan or the entire U.S., so I think I'm pretty well on my way. But I love the job. So but again, the Michigan Works lets me work remotely, again, with 14 offices around the UP from St. Ignace to Bessemer Ironwood. It's a large territory up into the Keweenaw. So I get paid for traveling the UP. So where else can you find a job like that, so to speak? But I think my personal mission and the mission of Michigan Works is a great match, and I believe in both. So I think anytime you have an opportunity to do that with people, take advantage of it, because it works well.
So Spencer had mentioned the idea of it doesn't have to be inside, the mission doesn't have to be inside the business. It might be accommodating somebody really doing the things that they want to do or making an impact in the community overall. And I hate to put one of my bosses on the spot, but I thought maybe, Gina, you shared something, I don't remember when it was, some time ago about Stormy Cromer had kind of changed it. It had always quietly helped people in the community, but changed that, not because you're looking for recognition, but because it was important for your employees to be a part of an organization that took care of its community. Could you maybe just share a little bit about that?
Yeah, honestly, we had like a focus group with some employees last summer about how we could recruit some of their friends to come work for us. And in the process, we learned a lot about retaining the people in the room. So pro tip, it's a great idea to do that. But yeah, one of the things that came up, they said, well, why don't we donate to Dove, the domestic violence shelter? And my dad was like, well, we do. Well, why don't we support the animal shelter? Well, we do. But we hadn't ever, we weren't doing that to have the check and the picture in the paper, and so we just did it quietly. And so now we've got these TV screens, another thing we added throughout the factory with different announcements and things that people need to know. And so now we're putting up, this upcoming event, we're a sponsor of it. We're sponsoring the 906 Adventure Team, the bike plates on the kids' bikes, that's us. So just trying not to show off, but it's important. Mm-hmm. We actually, when we gave out bonuses this winter, we got a handwritten note from someone who thanked us more because we donated to the domestic violence shelter in Ironwood than for the bonus. That meant so much to her that we supported them. So if that's the story you were looking for.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And it's a different way of thinking about it, right? That wouldn't be an employee retention strategy that would have come up 5 years or 10 years ago. May have been a good kind of community profile strategy, but in terms of making the case for retaining employees, it wouldn't have really entered into the picture. But just recognizing that there is this sense of purpose and belonging and an impact is so important. How about for those that have the types, I think about like at the Small Business Association of Michigan, we have an awesome mission, and for certain positions, they're like right in the middle of that mission. But we also need people to process the payroll. We need people to handle the the event planning details. We need there's 28 people on the team. Maybe just talk a bit about how you pull in the ones who maybe aren't doing the front line part of the work, but are playing a supporting role, and how to connect that so that they can kind of feel the same pride toward the work that's happening.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. For people of a certain age, you may remember BASF had a commercial that showed a couple of different products, and it said, we didn't make the carpet, we didn't make the paint on the car, but we helped to make it all better, right? And I think that's how you engage those Maybe they're not your revenue generators, but my team in HR, they know that we're here to remove barriers so that people can do their best work every day. And that's how we keep people coming back. And it's the same thing. I feel like your payroll processor, if he or she didn't do their job, you'd get some instant feedback from the team. I feel pretty confident about that. And I think Gina made a really important point. There are times when we come to work and we think we know what's important to people. I think a great way to figure out how you engage those people is just to have those conversations with them. Tell us what's important to you. And I don't think you have to have a whole lot of cost-based strategies around that. When people feel seen and heard, they're more likely to engage.
Yeah, one of the things that we do, like I think of my administrative staff and my fiscal staff, they're really sharp. Our fiscal, our chief financial officer has been at Michigan Works for about 20 years. But one of our mottos is, how do we help other organizations succeed? So they're kind of in the background in Escanaba, but Marty Fatante and Sarah Lucas, when they were up here, that $7.2 million that Marty talked about, we put that through our ACH system and distributed that to all of the companies that received that money. Now, that's not an out front, shout it from the rooftops type of thing. But again, people were appreciative that money could get through quickly because other ways weren't quite as efficient, so we could get that right out there. So I think focusing on that idea of helping other organizations succeed helps some of our behind-the-scenes staff who are just great at what they do. We've had solid audits for 20, 30 years. It's like, yeah, audit, done, check that off. Our monitoring from the state, our frontline staff, we always get great monitoring reports. So it's just little things like that that really hold the thing together, for us anyway. Your situation might be a little different, but that's how we exist in the quasi-governmental work that is Michigan Works.
When you think of people having their dream job, so everybody wants to have their dream. If you look at it from a research perspective, people don't find their dream job. And that's what they think. They're in search of their dream job. They think I'm just going to find it. And when I find it, I'll be happy. In reality, when you look at people who say that they have their dream job, what they did is they took a job that was in the ballpark. It was okay. And then they took something they didn't like about that job and they got rid of it. They had somebody else do it. They outsourced it. They automated it. And then they took something else they didn't like about the job and they did the same thing and kind of rinse and repeat. Maybe they found something that they really liked that they could add to it. And they did that over a period of years, and eventually they worked their way into their dream job. That is key. And as company owners, if you can help people work in the right direction, it's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be their true dream job. But as long as they're moving in the right direction, they can see a path. Even the tiniest things can matter. When one person leaves, somebody steps up and says, hey, can I take that one part of their job, just that one report? And you dole that report out to somebody internally, make that person's job a little better, and just keep working it. That's a key to finding your dream job.
So I want to make sure that we have an opportunity for people to either share some insight, tips and tricks or successes. Would love to hear that, or ask questions of the panel. Rich is watching with the microphone. While he's walking across, I'll throw out, let's talk some just hardcore, pay and benefits type situations. Like we know that all this stuff is good, but you still have to be competitive. What does that competitive landscape look like? What sorts of things are you seeing change? How big are those changes? Maybe even looking over the horizon a little bit, and what employers are doing. I guess mainly it's focused on like retention, but then also attraction, because it's easy to find yourself in the attraction game because you fell asleep at retention.
Yeah, so employees cost more today. There's just significant upward pressure on wages because of the war for talent that we talked about. I don't think that's a bad thing, to be honest with you. At a certain level, wages had been fairly stagnant for a number of years. It's certainly challenging, as a business owner, to try and fit that extra cost into your budget. But I think a couple of things that a couple of watch outs from my perspective. Going to market to attract talent, you're going to spend more typically than what you have in the past. What that can set you up for internally is that you may create a situation where you're moving away from the parity and equity place with your current employees. So the more you're hiring, the more I would just suggest that you continue to look internally and make sure that job to job, employee to employee, that you're not neglecting your current staff, because that'll put negative pressure on your ability to retain staff as well. The opportunity for hybrid work we're seeing an awful lot of that. And some roles that's well suited to that, but making sure that you've determined if you can accommodate that within your organization. And then flexibility is just a big deal. At all levels, as we're hiring folks, people are asking almost out the gate before they talk to us about salary and benefits, because they assume that that's where it needs to be. How much time off am I going to have? Can I work from home a couple of days a week? What does that flexible workforce look like? And that's what we're seeing in our experience.
Yeah, I think that's the same thing that we're seeing too, and I think that flexibility, I think, is one part of the generational issue that you talked about, Spencer. That's going to be important to do, and we were talking about that at Michigan Works pre-pandemic. So, but I've again read something the other day that some of the changes coming down the pike that people were thinking, it's going to take, the experts say, 10 to 20 years. We did it. Well, we've all had to do it in 2, maybe because the pandemic condensed things so much. But it's a changing time, so to speak, and so take that into consideration. I'm going to sneak something else in here, but the first question you asked me about some of the practical things, we have Connor Powell over here. He's our apprenticeship coordinator for Michigan Works. That's another thing that's happening on the front line. So if you can focus on earn and learn type of things, like on-the-job training from a broad perspective, but call Spencer. We've got some apprenticeship opportunities, expansion grant opportunities in the UP where we need 200 new apprenticeships in a couple of years. So if you can get people into apprenticeship programs where they can earn and learn at the same time, that helps people across the board not only get the skills they need, but also take care of their family, because they're earning and learning at the same time. So that's another strategy to use on that. So thanks.
That's a great idea.
Okay.
A couple of very practical things in your postings. Anytime you can post your pay, post your pay. Yeah, you'll get about 30% more applicants, and they've already pre-vetted. I mean, they already kind of know what the pay range is. Sometimes that causes internal issues, and companies don't want to do that. But if you can post, try to post your pay. The other good thing about posting your pay, if you're not sure if you're in the market, you have a hard time finding comps for that job, or you're just not sure if it's right. If you post your pay, especially on social media, you'll hear about it. I mean, you'll hear like, "Are you kidding me? Like, that's terrible." And so you'll kind of get this audience feedback really quickly, and then be able to use that to help you inform your decision making. Because salary.com and sites like that they're really useful to get in ballpark, but when it comes to regional differences and what have you, it can be a real challenge to know. I mean, the variation is incredible for same job in different cities, even within the UP.
I found that to be true, Spencer, with anything that is a self-report. So if you're able to go out and share your salary, it tends to be less applicable than something that is where someone's actually done some specific research and reached deep into companies. So if you're in a particular industry, it's not unusual for industry associations to have wage data that's available to you. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has some wage ranges available too, so it doesn't always have to be a for-pay. Because we're in life sciences and med device, we have a subscription that we use, but it's worth it because it helps us be really specific with candidates when we're setting those pay levels, so that one, we're not wasting time with a candidate who has salary expectations that we can't meet, and that we're not missing a great candidate because we didn't hit the compensation spot on.
In addition to that, we did a comprehensive salary survey a couple of years ago and used a lot of those same sources. But one of the things we do every year when we make adjustments, we take a look at what's entry-level pay, but how are we being fair to our current people to keep that
Yeah.
equity in line? Because before you know it, it can get out of line pretty easily. So you have to, pay attention to that and use that from a strategic perspective to stay on top of it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Pay is something that you want to adjust incrementally and often, because if you let that can get too big, it's just a really difficult ask. Yeah,
A lot
I
of
would
worms coming out of that can.
yeah.
I would assume from the start that all of your employees know everybody's pay. They may not know exactly, but if they don't know, in fact, there's actual research on this. If they don't know it, they're going to assume the worst. They're going to assume everybody else is making more than them. So they will definitely talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great advice. We do have a question here.
So my question is around pay, and I think one of the definitions of economic development is when you raise the lowest class wage earner up the scale, right? So Bill, I know you guys, you have a report, I don't know if it's monthly or quarterly, I know it's quarterly for sure, but it shows the pay of the job seekers that go through Michigan Works. And it's like 20 or mid-20s. And you look in the paper, and it's way more than they're paying in the paper or they show in the paper. So my question is, with the way that wages are going up here in the last 3 to 6 months, that's going to blow your number right out of the roof, isn't it? Or you think that's going to stay level?
Well, I might have to defer to my staff who are the experts on this. So, but I'll take a stab at it. It's because some of that is specialized because of all the federal grants, the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, and other funding that we get. So there's a formula that we have to abide by to. We can't be the lowest, we don't want to be, because we're getting monitored on, are you meeting the expectations of the federal legislation? So that's probably a little bit smaller subset, but you have a point there. It's a balancing act, so how do you keep raising things but they still make sense within the greater economy? Yep, so. Anything else to add over there, Deb or anybody? No, I think you got it. Okay.
So let's talk a little bit then about about this process of first of all knowing what your employees want, but then also knowing what the marketplace is doing. We talked about some industry publications, salary surveys, but how about even just working conditions? Gina had mentioned talking to employees, about recruiting, and they learned a lot about what the current employees were looking for. Employee engagement, what type of role does that play? What types of tools and methods have you seen to engage so that the strategies really kind of hit the right spot in terms of retention?
Great question. The tactic that we've used is to do some routine pulse surveys. So we can contract with Gallup, who's a global surveyor, and engage around their Q12, which is basically 12 questions that get at the employee experience. But I don't think you can really discount how important it is to have a relationship with and have some conversation with your employees. They're dying to tell you what they want and what they think. And so having some routine focus groups where you're really just getting to know staff and what do they like. One of the things that we learned when we did that was very similar to what Gina shared, was that our employees were disappointed that we weren't more active in the community, and in particular around charitable giving. And so we were pleased to build out a program that we started to offer our employees volunteer time, so that we gave them opportunities to volunteer collectively with a group, so there's some engagement and team building there. But if you've got something that's really near and dear to your heart, we want to be able to give you time on behalf of our Resolve Surgical to be able to go and do that. And it helped us get to know our employees a little bit too. We had no idea that this person was interested in dogs, or maybe They were doing some volunteer work with their church or something else. So we found that to be really useful, and we're getting a lot of positive feedback back on that. And again, it links right back to that broader purpose, right? Maybe it isn't the job, maybe it is about what's really, what you're passionate about in your life or in your community.
I think from our perspective, as a small business, we have 18 people, so it's fairly easy. It's basically one-on-one communication. What do you want? How can we get you there? But it's also, if you ask people what they want everything. They want higher pay, more flexibility, more interesting work. And so then it becomes about trade-offs. It becomes, okay, if you could do this job, super flex schedule, work from home, whatever, but make $5 an hour less, would you do it? And some say, hell yeah, and some say never. And so you try to let them kind of make the choices that make sense for them. And then ideally let them switch. If they realize I made the wrong choice, or now I want the $5 or whatever. It's almost like, it sounds a little bit cold, but taking things that are very squishy and putting a dollar value on them, saying we can give you that, but there's a cost. And we do that quite a bit where we might have two people doing the exact same job that are getting very different pay, but their workload looks very different, their flexibility looks very different. One is a go-to, always there, on-call type person and show me the money. The other is the exact opposite, same exact job.
There have been national studies that show a fair number of people will pick the flexibility over the pay.
No, absolutely.
right.
So that's, something to experiment with. One thing I've did, and you could probably do it in your situation, but with 14 offices, the last 2 summers, my wife and I have gone on the road for 2 months. And I just visit offices, meeting with staff meetings, so kind of the focus group idea, but then also trying to implement, I'll take all the staff out for dinner. And we'll just have a lot of fun at a nice restaurant, having dinner, getting to kind of know each other on a more personal level. So anything you can implement in your company where there's visibility of top leadership staff and you're listening and engaging, build those relationships. Because I think that was a key when I first came to Michigan Works, because there were some transitions that we were in the midst of, like forming or putting 3 Michigan Works into one after Governor Snyder is prosperity region. So there was a little bit of, let's say, angst in the Upper Peninsula, but it's all worked out pretty well. But I went around and visited all board members, because I have 2 boards, and then visiting partner groups and staff, and just getting out there and communicating, I think helps build that culture and that trust that you want to have throughout your organization.
So speaking of trust comes from knowing people, having real relationships. Now there is definitely a trend toward flexibility and remote work. I think about even in our own association, we've not had much turnover in the last few years. In fact, many people have made their careers at SPM, and which is just a wonderful thing. So we could go remote when the government said we had to. In office work, we do compliance education. So even when everybody else stopped following the rules, we still followed them. But it was one thing for us when this team already knew each other. They already trusted each other. They already had the types of relationships that were required in order to hold the culture together, even when we weren't around each other all the time. Now we're in more of a hybrid type schedule, and it'll never go back. We did a survey. We asked at that time all 27 members of the team, would you like to go back to the regular 8 to 5 in the office, all of us together? Would you like to have some sort of flexible hybrid schedule, or would you rather be fully remote? And 100% did not choose 8 to 5 in the office. So there wasn't a single person. By the way, I took the survey too. So there was not a single person among the entire team that said, yeah, no, I think it's really important that we show up at 8 and we leave at 5. That it just was something that was done. But here's the thing is that couldn't just let everybody be remote. Some of the jobs required there to be, for people to be in person. So it's kind of a two-part question. How do you hold your culture together, especially as you have turnover in new people? Or maybe you're building a new culture. But then also, how do you deal with potential jealousy or animosity between certain types of employees that can work remotely and other types of positions that can't?
Snacks.
Snacks?
Yeah, we had that exact scenario, right? When the world turned upside down, we had all of our engineers and our accounting staff, and it was like saloon doors, right? When we're like, you got to work from home, and everybody was gone. And then we had these awesome production employees who didn't have that option. And so we did actually do an awful lot of, there was a lot of ice cream sandwiches eaten in during COVID. It's a balance. I think it's a challenge on both sides. And one of the things that we do is we try to, we highlight some wins of the week from a production standpoint and from an office standpoint. And we try just to humanize the group, right? We highlight that everybody, to your point earlier about the accountant, does he or she feel as important as the person who's, closing a sale? Really just talking about the contribution that they're making. I'm super proud we were able to do this yesterday. We've been really transparent with our financials, and our CFO says that accounting is love because it just brings everything together, which I just was like, where did we get this guy, and how did you pass the drug test? But he's awesome, and he's insistent that everybody, our janitor, our production staff member, our engineers all understand the basics of the business and the basics of how we get paid and how we're successful. And yesterday we got to announce to our staff that we're expanding our incentive compensation to every single member of the team. And so, but we're going to expect that you're going to understand what EBITDA means, and that here's how you can positively impact EBITDA. And so you're going to be able to participate in those gains. And so pulling some of the sort of norms that separate the teams, I think has been really important to us. It's the right thing to do in my mind, just from a business ethics standpoint, and it's the right thing to do from a preparing for growth standpoint. So, and when I look back on my 90,000 hours, that's going to be one of the things that I like.
So kind of pulling both pulling the curtain back a little bit,
Yep.
letting everybody in on the secret, but
Yep.
then also, it all sounds like empowerment too. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you know Daniel Pink, he's a seminal writer around the world of work, and he did a piece on motivation, and there were some key components that we all assume that economics are really the driver, and for some people it is, but for most of us, to your point earlier, Brian, we want to think that we're changing the world, right? We want to think that we're involved in something bigger than ourselves. We want to have a little bit of autonomy. And there are strategies around how you can build that into your workplace, actually, and the benefits that it has. And then some personal mastery, right? I want to feel like I'm getting better at something, whether that's my job, whether that's yodeling, or whatever you do in your off hours. And I think if you look at employees in that way, you see them as whole people, and you can create strategies around that.
Yeah, I think that's key. One of the things I tell our staff, and I did this when I was first hired, and we had an all-staff meeting, but I think it's part of our orientation too, but I announced to people, trust is assumed and given. So just show up, we assume you know the job or you'll learn it, so we want to get out of your way, and we want you to build the relationships and have the trust, so go for it. And have fun doing it in the meantime. We like to have fun, because some of the same ideas that you talked about. I don't know if Steve Leto is still here from our staff. Steve, is still here? He's our resident disc jockey out of the Ironwood Bessemer office. He disappeared, okay. But he has a thing where every week he asks one staff person, what's your favorite song or songs? So people get to post that. We get to see what different people like. So my taste is a lot different than some of our younger staff. So since I go back to the 60s and 70s, but I'm vocal. Anyway, but yeah,
Good.
it's just those kinds of, well, I think one of our other mottos is we want to surprise people with who we are. And so I think that applies to anybody. Surprise people in a nice way so there's an expectation there that, yeah, there's something to connect to. And I think
Yeah.
that's part of that purpose and
Yeah.
people feeling like something, or they're part of something bigger.
There's a lot of focus in recent history on culture and driving the right culture and what have you, which I think can be good, but it's ultimately culture almost always comes from the top. So the owner, the CEO, whatever they're like, that's gonna just kind of go downhill. If the owner CEO is very serious and focused on the financials, no interpersonal stuff, then that's gonna be the culture. If the owner's kind of goofy and fun, but doesn't look at the books, that's going to be the culture. So you can fake it a bit, but ultimately the culture is going to kind of happen naturally. And if you want to change it, the owner should look in the mirror.
Yeah, when we were fully remote with just a core team in once a week to, get the mail and do the stuff that you couldn't otherwise do, we did these staff meetings, and it was, Zoom and the Brady Bunch picture there, and so we started adding on different things, getting to know each other and meeting the pets and the kids and all that kind of stuff that you otherwise would see in the inside of people's houses that you wouldn't have ever seen before, but. And asking what's your favorite band? Like when I asked, I put a catch on it. Like, what's your favorite band? Unless it's Taylor Swift, and tell me your second favorite. And nobody said the correct answer, which is the Beatles. I don't know.
Well, I remember when Quentin Messer first came, he went around with an introductory little game with the state CDC group, I believe it was, and he asked everybody what their favorite song was. And I remember saying, well, and many of you will probably relate to this. He's kind of a folk rock jazz singer. I'm blanking on his name, but he has a song called I Don't Like Half the People I Love. So that's my favorite song for the moment. But because I think we can all identify with that in some way, shape, or form. So
Right.
anyway.
Well, why don't any?
Just how about childcare? What can you say about that? Is that impacting any of your?
It's go ahead,
Childcare.
go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, this might be a strange, we have a lot of employees who are, they're moms basically, who were professionals in other industries, made a lot more money, and never saw their kids and traveled all the time. And they came to us because of the flexibility. Now, we're not providing, and they're providing their childcare, but we're providing them with the flexibility to handle it more on their own, I'd say. So that's a small business approach. And we get incredible talent at a bargain rate. And although some of those bargain rates are not so bargain anymore, but when they first came on, and on that topic, one thing for anybody at the business in the UP, if you see somebody from another place who's making way more money, don't exclude them from your pile. Talk to them. Because there are tons of great applicants who want to come back to the UP, and they will take massive pay cuts. I mean, just they'll work for a third sometimes of what they're making today. And then 3 years later, you talk to them, and they're happy as can be. So, and I'm not saying it's not a flag, because it is a flag, but just don't exclude them, because a lot of times employers won't even want to talk to them, and they can be great hires.
Michigan Works, we have a child care initiative UP-wide. Sarah Lucas, who you saw in the previous panel, she's chairing it for us, but we've got about 30-some members on there. There are some businesses, local economic development organizations, InvestUP is part of it, the Great Start Collaborative and other child care providers. So we're trying to take a look at what are some new ways to look at child care, because I'll just kind of lay it out there. I think the old way of doing childcare, or the typical way of doing childcare, is getting dated. I'm not sure we're going to, get to where we need to be with just doing the same old thing. So I've had some conversations with Joe Teal from Innovate Marquette. And if you know Joe, he's not short on new ideas. But how can businesses be part of that? Because he's got some models in other places where businesses have on-site childcare, or they collaborate with other nearby businesses. Is there a way to use existing employees with release time to care for kids? And now you have to balance that out with what requirements are in place for safety and all of that. But I think we want to explore some of those ways. But childcare is just a huge issue, yeah.
It's not, and I want to knock on something. It is not risen to the level of an issue for us. And yeah, it's just, you know, our production staff, it's not come up as an issue. We're certainly keeping our eye on it. We offer an awful lot of flexibility and work from home options on the other side. So for us, it's not been an issue, but I have empathy for the organizations, and I'm sure there's great minds out there coming up with some models.
Hey, listen, I got to give these guys a little bit of a break because
All
I
right.
sailed right from ours into your presentation, and I'm sure that people might need a quick 5 or 10 minutes. We're going to take a little bit of a quick break here. We're going to come back at 4 o'clock for the advocacy session. I think you'll get a lot out of that. I hope you'll stay and take that in. I want to thank this group, you know, on the panel. A lot of great insight. If you have other questions for them, please grab them while they're still here. And let's take about a 10-minute break and reconvene here shortly.